Learning a Siche and Chelek Yud Zayin on Pirkei Avos, Perek Gimel. As the minig is, we learn Pirkei Avos in the Shabbosim between Pesach and Shavuos, and then minig Chabad is to continue learning Pirkei Avos throughout the summer months until Rosh Hashanah. So here, this Sicha on Perek Gimel is a beautiful Sicha, as all the Sichas on Pirkei Avos, the Rebbe takes the Mishnah and gives us a completely new understanding, a deeper understanding to what the Mishnah is saying. One of the basic ideas the Rebbe would always say regarding the Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos, as we'll see in this Sicha as well, based on the Gemara that says, "Man de boy lemev chassideh," a person that wants to be a chassid, so he should learn milid Avos. He should fulfill or learn what it says in Pirkei Avos. So therefore, when you see Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos, and some of it may seem superficially very simple, very straightforward, of basic ideas of what a person should do and how he should behave, there has to be something deeper that's meant for a person that wants to grow to the level of a chassid. And the same is here with this Mishnah. When we learn this Mishnah, it seems very puzzling that a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos would talk about something so simple and basic. Today's shir is being learned to Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Koltman. Rabbi Chanine Zgan HaKoyanim Maimeh. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Chanine Zgan HaKoyanim says, having mispalel b'shleima shel malchus. You should daven for the welfare of the government. Sheil mole meira, if not for this, that people are afraid of the government, ish esrei chaim bloy, a man would swallow his fellow alive. So the simple pshat of the Mishnah is talking about the fact that you have to have a government, law and order, in order that people shouldn't kill each other and do things that are harmful to one another. So the question here is, Aleph, number one, Razal Zogin, the Gemara tells us, Man de boy lemev chassideh, one that wants to be pious on the level of a chassid, the kayim chulu milid Avos. Let him fulfill what it says in the Mishnayos and Pirkei Avos. So what this means is, as the Masechta Avos besteht from milid chassidusa. All the Mishnahs in Masechta Avos consists of teaching us things that are on the next level. Things in order for a pious behavior as a chassid. Such kind of customs or behaviors that are not required based on just the letter of the law. But Mishnah is saying that one should follow and do this because of going beyond the letter of the law. Al derech, to bring a simple example for this, in the Erste Mishnah from dem Perek. If you look at the lesson that the Mishnah teaches us, in the first Mishnah of this Perek, of the third Perek, Histakel b'shloishe dvarim, ve'nat bali de avera. There are 3 points that you should look at and pay attention to, and you won't come to do an avera. What is the chiddush of this Mishnah? Shuras adin is mechayiv nor as the yid on the ton de avera b'poel. The letter of the law demands of a person not to actually sin. And if then is meisiv the Mishnah, here, so this Mishnah adds more on Haga Chasidusis, a behavior which is pious and more than the letter of the law. Steinen am Matzah von Yiras Chet, that a person should see that he should be in a condition of God-fearing or afraid of a sin. Und das ist euch an Eitze und Anweis, and this is also advice and guidance, as er soll nicht zukommen und erfüllen nont dazu. That he shouldn't even come close to this idea of, not even to come close to doing an Aveda. How? Durch hereintrachten sich in die 3 Sachen, ve'ein atoba lidei aveda. You're not even going to come near the possibility of doing an aveda. It's going to be out of the question in your mind if you're going to be well focused on these 3 subjects. So we can clearly see here how this Mishnah is taking a person and elevating him to a place and a level where an aveda is completely out of the question. That's beyond the letter of the law. However, they have mispal b'shleim shel malchus. The Mishnah that says that one should daven for the welfare of the government. This is not something related in any way to this pious behavior, or being careful about something beyond the letter of the law. On the contrary, to be careful not to swallow your fellow alive is obvious and is a necessity based on the most stringent or severe matters that Torah demands of a Yid. So why is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos saying something that relates to Chaim Bloy? Beis, the second question here is, what is the diak haloshen ishas re'eh chaim bloi? What's the meaning of the choice of words in this Mishnah that one would swallow his friend alive? Very unusual expression. The haloshen v'sas ragel u'pashit nazar fal is hariga. What it seems like the Mishnah is saying is that if there's no fear of law and order, or there is no law and order, so then people would just kill one another. So the usual term is used, hariga. That's murder. When Avram Avinu comes to a place and he says, there's no fearing of God here in this place, and he says, V'haraguni, I'm afraid for my life. So the term that's used is V'haraguni. Or if it's regarding money matters, so then the term that's always used is Gzeila, to steal. Aber da wird euch gemeint Räuberei und Geldschaden. Oib da wird euch gemeint Räuberei und Geldschaden. If the term Chaim Beloi does not just mean to kill, but it also means to steal, so then the term would be used Gzeila. Or similar kinds of expressions. Favos wird genutzt a chidush lashon. Why is it using here a very unusual expression, ve'inyan, and seemingly this new concept of a person Chaim Beloi swallowing his friend alive? What is this all about? Gimel, the third question here is, who is the Mishnah talking about? When the Mishnah says, Ishas Chaim Bloi, if there's no law and order, so then this is something that would happen amongst Yidden, or this is something that would happen amongst people B'chlal, amongst Goyim, that Yidden are living amongst them. So the Rabbi explains, everything that happens in the world is dependent on the behavior of Yidden. And as we understand, based on the pasuk, nasam belibam. What goes on in the world is placed in the heart of the Yid. The way Yidden behave, that's how things are influenced in the world. So from them is verstandig. So if so, it's understood as far as the pshat on this Mishnah here. As the Rinyan from the Molim ish esre'eyu chayim beloi. When the Mishnah says that if not for fear of a government, then people would swallow one another alive. Is da oich chas v'shalom by Yidden. The intention here is that this could, God forbid, be even amongst Yidden. On the contrary, when Yidden fulfilled the lesson this Mishnah is saying, to have law and order and not to swallow one another alive, so then this is also influenced that it should be the same in the behavior of other people in the world as well, as is all that they shouldn't swallow one another alive. So basically the point here is that the Mishnah is talking about this possibility even amongst Yidden themselves. L'chayre is tamua. So the question here is very difficult to understand how this can be. Wie is shaykh, man soll wegen Yidden sagen. How is it possible to say regarding Yidden, as chot, shazena faran, kama, v'kama, klora, tzivui, Hashem bazeh. Even though there are more than one very clear mitzvahs or commands by the Eibishter about this. Is venit die meide von Malchus. If not for the fear of a government, wollten Yid eingeschwungen und nicht stam a zweiten nor a filler that a Yid would swallow, and who would he swallow? Not just somebody random, but his friend, his fellow. A Yid would swallow him alive. How could this be true? How could the Mishnah even be speaking about such a scenario amongst Yidden? Und befrat kanal, and especially, as we said before, as da retzach wegen a Yidden was lernt Avos. We're speaking about a Yid that's learning this Mishnah, Masech Avos. Weil, boile mevich chassideh. He wants to be pious. Darf haben die bewarnisch von haben mispal beschleunisch und machas, as is only beleh sein reheil. He needs to be warned to be careful not to swallow his fellow alive. How could this be? So this is the beginning of the Mishnah, and now the Rebbe continues here in Sif Beis, in the next part of the Mishnah, that seemingly brings an unrelated statement from another Tana. Nach dem gebrachten Maime steht in der Mishnah, so then, after the above mentioned statement about Ishas Chaim Beloi, so it's brought here in the very same Mishnah, and this is according to the version of the Alter Rebbe, that this is one Mishnah, another statement. Reb Chanina ben Tradian said, Shnayim sheyeshvim, two individuals that are sitting. Ve'en b'neim divrei Torah, and there's no words of Torah between them. Hareizeh moishev leitzim. They are people that are sitting that are leitzim, just scoffers or mockery. The fact that there's no Torah amongst them, so then they shouldn't be sitting together. Avol shnayim sheyeshvim v'yesh b'neim divrei Torah. Two that are sitting and there is Torah amongst them. V'chulu, the Mishnah goes on to say how positive that is and brings a pasuk as a source for this, as we'll see in the end of the Sikha. Now, why is this coming in the same Mishnah? Shemer Molgeret, it was already explained many times, as the Fananda tel from the Mishnayos is bediuk, that the way the Mishnahs are divided is also precise. And das is negei la'alacha l'maisa. The division of one to the next Mishnah is actually something that could have a relevance in halacha, an actual halacha. Then einer is mekadesh es ha'isha al menas she'ni yedei lishnais. If a person is marrying his wife and he stipulates the marriage on the fact that he knows lishnais. Lishnais means as the kiddushin zenen of t'nai as a ken mishnais. The kiddushin, the marriage, should take effect on the condition that he knows how to learn mishnais. That's what lishnais is. The yeshleima as zenen genug und neitig zu kennen drei mishnais. What does it mean he knows how to learn mishnais? How many mishnahs does that have to be? He has to know at least how to learn and explain 3 mishnahs. Rabbi brings it here from the Paiskim in Even HaEzer. So it's very relevant to know how we divide the Mishnah. So over here, this Mishnah, Reb Chanina ben Tradin, is actually part of the same Mishnah. Was yesh sheimrim, ach zu euch zu lieb dem, hat der Alter Rebbe reingestellt in Masechta Avos in sein Siddur. Some say that this is also one of the reasons why the Alter Rebbe placed the Mishnayos of Pirkei Avos in the Siddur. Even though it's not part of davening, and yes, there is a minute to learn Pirkei Avos in the weeks on Shabbos afternoon, but it could be learned from a Mishnayos. Why did Alter Rebbe place it into the Siddur? So this is one of the reasons. To wissen dem Ofen von Chalukas HaMishnayos. In order to give us and to divide the Mishnayos properly in the Alter Rebbe's version. And therefore, over here, the Alter Rebbe divides the Mishnayos, and actually here, Reb Chanina ben Tradin is in the same Mishnah as the previous statement of Reb Chanina's Gana Kain. Isn't it move on? So the question here is, was is the Hemshech and Shayches von Maimer, Shnaim Sheyeshvim v'chulu? What's the continuation and the connection of what it says here? Shnaim Sheyeshvim, about 2 people that are sitting together. So Maimer, to the previous statement, have a mispal b'shleima, to daven for the welfare of the government. Was the Fashtein Beide in a Mishnah, and therefore they're both in the same Mishnah. At first glance, there's no connection between these 2 points in the same Mishnah. On the contrary, if you look on the continuation of the next Mishnah here, the Svar is Mechayev, it would have been logical, as der Maimer hat Shayches und darf zugestellt werden zu dem weiteren Mishnah. This statement here about 2 people sitting, that they should have Torah amongst them, this belongs in the next Mishnah, where it says Rab Shimon Oime Gimel Sham Achlu, 3 people rather, that are sitting and eating together, V'lo yamru alav divrei Torah, and are not speaking words of Torah. Was euch dort wegen dem Iluf von divrei Torah b'chabura. There as well, it speaks about the advantage of learning Torah when it's with a few people together. Und der chesaron von a chabura on divrei Torah. And what's lacking when there are people sitting together and there's no divrei Torah amongst them. So that's clearly the same theme, the Shnaim Sheyeshvin. So why did Alter Rebbe place this in the Mishnah where it talks about Ishas Re'eh Chaim Bloi, and not in the Mishnah where it discusses clearly the same subject? So the Rebbe begins here this explanation in Siv Gimel with a new understanding of what this unusual term of Ishas Re'eh Chaim Bloi means. The Abir in them, the explanation here is as follows. V'balt the Masechta Avos and halt Mili Chasiduse v'demonted. Since this Masechta is containing in it just matters that are a higher level of behavior, pious behavior, as we mentioned. Das heißt, als da seinen Heureus für jeden, was ist ganz und abgeht und Limudat Torah und Kiyum Mitzvahs. These are lessons or guidance for a Yid that's complete in his fulfillment of mitzvahs and his learning of Torah. Nothing is missing him. On him felt nor der Anhage von Midas Chassidus. What he's lacking, though, is that his behavior should go to the next level, to a level of a chassid, a pious behavior. Is b'meila poshet, so then it's obvious, as this nidokin art in anzuweisen, anzusagen rather, as on it bagazlen na zweiten Yiden. There's no room to come and command this individual or teach this individual that he shouldn't steal from another Yid. Unavaden it dem Zivi, as on it unreading dem Leben von a Yidin. Definitely, there's no reason to command him that he shouldn't touch the life of another Yid. Es b'meila poshit, favos da steht nit bavarnish von Ishas Re'eh harogoi or the bagazelt, and that's exactly the reason why the Mishnah does not use the term of that usually is used when you're touching the life of another Yid or you're stealing from him. Der diok is da dafke. So what's the precise words the Mishnah says? Ish es re'ehu chayim b'loi. That a man to his fellow, he will swallow him alive. What does this mean, swallow alive? Will nicht anreden chas v'shalom dem Leben und Eigentum von der zweiten Jiden. He's following the letter of the law, and obviously he's not interested at all, God forbid, to touch or affect the life or even any of the property or possessions of another Yid. Sein Ratzon is not, however, his desire is only, and the Rebbe puts only into quotations, chayim b'loi, to swallow them alive. What does that mean? As der Leben, the life, the mitzias und the meisen, the existence and all the deeds von zweiten, of another, of your fellow, sollen sein eingeschlungen in sein mitzias. It should be absorbed and swallowed up by you, by your entity. In other words, when there's another person, whether a colleague, whether a friend, or a learning partner, someone else that you live with, you want him to be so overwhelmed by your mitzias, by your existence, by your choice, that he feels like that he can't speak up for himself, he can't express himself, he can't live for himself. You're totally overwhelming him with your ideas and your emotions, that there's no space for the other person. He's swallowed up by you without having any space for himself. That's the idea of Ishus Re'eyu Chayim B'loi, that you're swallowing him alive by your overwhelming presence that's sort of controlling him. Now at times is Adarabah. So on the contrary, in other words, what happens here is, where does this come from? How does this happen? It happens because this Yid is on a high level. The Mailis V'Serhat. Because we're speaking about a Yid that is following the letter of the law and doing everything it says in Shulchan Aruch, and he's learning Torah V'Serhat, as there is ganz and limit Torah in his upkeep and mitzvahs canal, kegen den, and then, in contrast to who he is and his learning and his mitzvahs, he sees that there viel chesronis beim zweiten Yiden. He recognizes all the different things that are lacking by his fellow. Befrat, wenn jener is an ishpashit in Yediyas HaTorah, especially if this individual that he's living with or working with is just a simple person, and as far as it comes to his knowledge in Torah, and also possibly not being careful properly in fulfillment of mitzvahs. So this itself will lead on it actually forces him to this conclusion as jene darf sein bottle to him, that his fellow has to just nullify his will and nullify everything he does to him, to this individual that's the one that knows how to learn, the one that is careful with all mitzvahs. So automatically my opinion matters and the other person's opinion doesn't matter. And what I say goes, and what the other person feels completely intimidated, and he feels like he has no space in the presence of such an individual that expresses who he is with his learning and his mitzvahs, that the other person can't open his mouth. Furthermore, you think to yourself that this is actually a merit and a good idea for this person, as wird sein eingeschlungen in sein Metzias, that he's going to be totally swallowed up or absorbed by or controlled by my entity, because I'm the know-it-all. I know everything and I do everything right. So I'll teach him and I'll show him. Another person becomes completely swallowed up by this kind of attitude that you have. That's the idea of Ish Esri'eyu Chaim B'loi, not giving the space for another person. He's alive and he's living, and according to the letter of the law, the other person is, I'm only helping him out. But really what you're doing is you're sort of choking him. You're controlling him in a way that he feels like he has no space to grow and to develop on his own. So now the question becomes, what do we do for a person to have the right balanced relationship with another person? Even if, yes, you are more knowledgeable and you do mitzvahs more than another person, but what's the eitzah here for a person to have the right approach, to allow the person his space and his choice and to develop on his own? So in Sif Daled, the Rebbe explains this. Kedei to sheil sein azah hergish und anhage, in order to negate such a kind of a feeling towards your fellow and such a kind of behavior, is nit genug as seichel de gazbara. For this, it's not going to be enough to logically explain to yourself the necessity of this. Varum? Because adarabah, on the contrary, mitzat seichel amiti. Because if you're just looking at this purely logically, if you just look at this and seichel amiti, the way Torah looks at this, varum da retzich nit wegen hasheite rasha v'gasa ruach chas v'shalom. We're not speaking about an individual that's a fool or wicked or just outright haughty behavior where he just looks down at everybody condescendingly, God forbid. That's not what we're speaking about. On the contrary, we're talking about a person that's really wants to do things right. He's a tzaddik, he's learning and he's davening and he's doing mitzvahs. Is da not fazat taina. So his attitude, that he has to someone that's living with him that's on a much lower level than him. So the fact that I am so controlling in a way, and I don't give space for the other, and I'm guiding him and showing him everything, and in this way that he feels completely overwhelmed by this, there's room for this. Why? Because self kol self is doch hagodol in Torah unen kiyum mitzvos v'chulu. The fact is that he is great in his learning, and he is so meticulous in his fulfillment of mitzvahs. In the Zeit when Reyeyu, while at the same time his fellow is gar weit von der Madrege, is very far from this. Und der Cheshbon is emes und ausgehalten leiten derech und mas von Torah. And therefore this calculation and this approach could be true if you take just the letter of the law, the way Torah is designed, what it says in the Torah, that he's meant to learn from me. I'm meant to teach him everything, and he should just close his mouth and listen to what I tell him. And especially if the case actually is that the other person does need my guidance and does need me to teach him and show him how to fulfill a mitzvah, so then you say to yourself that there's no reason for me to even allow the other person to express his opinion or to choose for himself. I'll control him and I'll tell him everything what to do. So therefore, so even after you'll try to explain and talk to a person, but if it's only going to be, you're going to try to logically explain to him that you have to give this other person his space, allow him his independence, allow him to choose for himself. He's also a human being. He's not as knowledgeable as you, but he's a human being that could think for himself, and let him grow and develop on his own. If you're going to try to explain that, the person will not get it. He still will not step away from his notion, from his attitude. That my friend, which is so dependent on me, he's on such a low level, and therefore he needs me, so he should just listen and nullify his opinion to me, and I will explain him everything. And he becomes absorbed and swallowed up in my entity. It's just an attitude which is very hard to shake off, because this is the fact of the matter. The fact of the matter is that this person knows nothing, and I'm going to teach him everything anyways. So therefore, with the best explanation that allowed the other person his independence, it's hard to accept. The Eight says, so therefore, here comes our Mishnah and gives us the advice to poil sein by sich shlilas hanal kedeboy, that a person should be able to affect on himself. He is on this higher level, and nevertheless, he should have a proper effect by realizing to change his attitude towards his fellow, kedeboy, the way it's demanded, the way it should be, fully. It's to mekayim sein the Herav from the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, here's the lesson, fulfill what it says, have a mispalel b'shloima shel malchus. You should daven for the welfare of the malchus, of the government. And here the Rebbe will give us a completely new understanding of what the welfare of the malchus, of the government, means. The point here is that by davening for the welfare of the government, that by ihm derweckt werden die Meire von Melech Malchi Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This will actually inspire him to have fear of the Eibishter, which is the King of all kings, the source of the government, that he's davening for their welfare. Und der Hergish HaYireh, and when he will sense and feel this fear of Hashem, hat bekoyach zu poil sein bei ihm. This is what has the power to influence this person, as soll sich nicht halten größlich ab der Zweiten. That he should not see himself as more, as better, as greater than the other person, that he totally overwhelms him and he swallows him alive. So what are we talking about over here? What is really the connection between the welfare of the government here in this world and Yiras Hashem, to fear from Hashem, Melech Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It seems to be just some kind of a hint that Malchus in the Mishnah could also be connected to the Malchus of Hashem. But the Rabbi here will explain that it's not actually a hint. This is where the Malchus in this world comes from. The Asbara in them, the explanation is as follows. Razal Zagin, it says in the Gemara, Malchusa da'ara, Ke'en Malchusa da'rekiya. That matters the way it is by a king here in this world are similar to the way it is with the heavenly king, with Hashem. And the Asbara derfun is, what's the explanation? Why is it so? So kiyidua, so it's known, the explanation that it says, as Malchusa da'ara kumt arab durch Ishtalshlos von Malchusa da'rekiya. The existence of a kingdom, of a government here in this world evolves from the source of the true kingdom, which is Hashem, the king in heaven. Der Melech dolamata hat sein Sheirish in sein Sar Lamaila. A king here below in this world has his source a minister in the heavens. That's the source of the way things are happening with this kingdom here in this world. Und der Sheirish von dem Sar is in a hechere darga, and then the source of this minister above, spiritually, is from in a higher level. And azay hecher and hecher, and the source goes back, it traces back higher and higher. Gavoya mi'al gavoya shemer, expression of a pasuk, higher and higher, each one on their post. Bis zum Malchus u'melech malchi amlocham hakadosh baruch hu, all the way going back to the ultimate source of kingdom over the entire world, which is Hashem, the King of all kings. So really the existence of kingdom in this world is really evolves and is an expression of the ultimate source of kingdom, which is Hashem's kingdom, the King of all kings. So now the fun is verstandig. From this we understand, as b'shas es is da shloima shel malchus. When you have a government and everything is with peace, and you're davening for the welfare of this government, b'pashtus, in a simple sense, the things physically and materially are the way they should be. As malchusa da'ara hersh mit hashleimus chulu, that the control of the government is full over the citizens of the country. Is there emes etavis to them? What's the real reason and cause of this? Weil in malchusa da'ara zot sich heraus der sheidish malchusa derekia, malchusa shel kadosh baruch hu mit aggressor and takeif. That's because the heavenly kingdom, Hashem's control over the world, is being expressed here in this kingdom with its fullest force. That the fact that we see the kingdom in this world that has proper control over matters in the country and everything is civil and good and peaceful, it's an expression of the real source of this kingdom, that's Hashem, that's being fully expressed here in this kingdom in the world. On the far, so therefore, now going back to what the Mishnah says here, v'nayid, was halchem, by mili de chasidus, a yid, that's on the level that he wants to go to the pious behavior, or b'meile zete, so therefore, a yid that's on this level of a chassid, and he looks at something here in this world, he doesn't just look at it superficially, but he wants to really see the truth of the matter, what this genuinely is. Is sein tefillin, the meaning from Shlomo Shel Malchus, so when he davens for the welfare of the government, what is he really davening for? Filter in them, he senses in this something much deeper. And biz mitariya mukshis, not just a sense, but even this is literally what he sees. When he looks at a king or at the government in this world, he really sees the expression of godliness or the godly kingdom through this government. So what he's really davening for and what he really sees is the revelation of Hashem's kingdom in the world. So therefore, when he sees this, the shalom of the malchus in this world, so by seeing the malchus that exists here in this world, this arouses in him, this inspires him for the fear of the source of his kingdom, or what he actually sees here in this kingdom in this world, which is the Eibishter, the King of all kings. And now the etzem yireh fardim Eibishin, and the very fear that he has of Hashem, poilt as by ihm wird nichna euch die nasus, sein Greis halten sich legabe a zweiten Jeden. So this is what subdues the fact that he sees himself better and more than someone else, and he deals with someone else condescendingly. So when he sees that he's standing in front of Hashem, that takes away that attitude altogether. This is not something which is logical, but when you stand in front of Hashem, there's no room for such kind of attitude to another person. When Hashem's kingdom is revealed and you're standing in front of Hashem, the greatest and the smallest are all one and the same. They all have the same value in front of Hashem. The greatest of greatest has no value, it takes up no space at all. As much as that's true about the most smallest person amongst small people, that doesn't have any value in front of Hashem. So therefore, when he realizes that he's standing in front of Hashem, so yes, it's true that he knows more Torah and he has to teach the other person, but it's not in a condescending manner. You don't absorb and swallow up the other person alive. You give him his space and it's balanced. Yes, you teach him, but you allow for the other person to think for himself, to develop for himself, and to express an opinion, and so on. So that's what the Mishnah is saying when it says, Meira shel Malchus, that a person, or Shloima shel Malchus rather, which brings the Meira of the Malchus, and therefore that prevents this attitude of Ish Yisrael Chaim Beloy. But there's another detail here in the Mishnah, that the Rebbe did not explain, which will be explained here in Sifei, because the Mishnah doesn't just say pay attention to the existence of kingdom in this world, and a chassid sees the kingdom as an expression of Melech Malchi and Melech HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the Mishnah speaks about mispal, daven for the welfare of the government, of the kingdom. What's the detail of mispal in this Mishnah? So the Rebbe gives an introduction to explain this. The Yetzer Hara is aber an Uman in sein Arbeit. Zu herabnehmen der Menschen von Derech HaYasher. As we know, the expression of Chazal, the Yetzer Hara, is a craftsman. He's a professional at his work to get a person off the straight path. The Rebbe is nit genug, so therefore it will not be sufficient, das was allein, the fact that he alone, with sein eigene keiches, with his own keiches that he has, his own powers that he has, wird sich misbeinen sein in der Minion von Shlomo Shel Malchus, that he will try to focus and pay attention to the government and the kingdom in this world. And the main point here is, as Malchusa Da'ara is Ke'en Malchusa De'Rekiach Chula Kanal, that when he sees kingdom in this world, what he's really looking at is an expression of the heavenly kingdom. Kanal, as explained, but this will not be enough. Varum says Olol, because it's still possible, as noch a gewissens man, soll die Esbeinenes Eifahren zu wirken kedebei, that over time, this focus will not necessarily have its effect properly. To leave the tachbulis hayetze, because of all kinds of schemes of the Yetzer Hara that he distracts a person, biz, die meide wird werden abgeschwacht, to the point that this fear of Hashem will become weakened, und im Ganzen ist battle werden, to the point that it'll be just gone. He won't see himself as standing in front of Hashem, where the greatest and the simplest are all the same. That's what the Yetzer Hara does. He distracts a person and confuses him and draws him into other things. So what's the Yetzer for this? The Far is mudgish in the Ayra. Therefore, what's stressed here in this guidance, in this lesson of the Mishnah, is having mispalel b'shleim shel malchus. Not just enough to be aware and to pay attention to the existence of the Eibish's malchus in this world, but daven for the shalom of malchus. What does this mean? Nit verlassen sich nor auf die Hisbeinenus mit eigener Keiches. It's not enough for a person just to rely on his own focus and to contemplate upon this with his own power. Nor muss ankommen zum Mispal sein. He has to also rely on this. He has to daven to Hashem. To tefillatan and eisbetten, to pour out his heart and daven to Hashem, as the Eibishter soll him helfen, betuvoi ubachastoi chesed chinam, that Hashem should help him with Hashem's goodness and kindness, a kindness which is not even earned at all, a kindness that comes purely from Hashem. As the Gemara tells us, if you don't have the assistance of above to deal with the Yetzer Hara, it's impossible to overcome all the different distractions that the Yetzer Hara brings upon a person. The Eibishter should help him with all above mentioned. This, as durich der Malchusa Da'ara, and then with the help of Hashem, giving him this clarity, so then by looking at the kingdom here and below in this world, he should be able to look and see, even just in the kingdom here below, that I'm really standing in front of Hashem wherever I am, and therefore I should never have this attitude of Chaim Beloi, of swallowing my fellow alive because I'm standing in front of Hashem. That's the detail of Mispal. So now we understand the meaning of this part of the Mishnah, of what Ishus Re'eh Chaim Beloi means, and what the Shlomo Shel Malchus means, and what the Mispal means. We come to the next part of the Mishnah that discusses two people that are sitting together, that there should be Torah amongst them. So here in Sivav, the Rebbe will explain that now we can understand the connection to the next part of the Mishnah. The mitvet sein move on the weitere Gehemsche von der Mishnah. So now it's understood the continuation of the Mishnah. Shnaim sheyeshvin ve'ein b'neim divrei Torah. Two people sitting together and there's no Torah amongst them. So here we're talking about the same kind of concept. A person's behavior and attitude towards his friend. The richtige Beweis, as der Adam, the real proof for this, that this individual was halt by milde Chasidusa, that's on the level that he wants to behave like a Chassid. Nachdem wie had gelernt Torah kedebei, after he already learns Torah properly, on his Zohar mitzvahs, he's careful, meticulous with mitzvahs, hat be'emes mevatel gewen, sein Gefühl von his nasos, und Geivel, dem Zulis, that he totally got rid of this kind of condescending attitude that he has regarding someone other than himself, someone else that he's with, is in them, was euch sein Lernen Torah is den Aneifen von Shnaim sheyesh mecholo. It's expressed by the fact that when he learns Torah with his fellow, what is his attitude of learning? It's Shnaim sheyeshvin. It's two that are sitting and learning together. And the Rabbi here will explain a deeper understanding of what this Shnaim sheyeshvin means. It doesn't simply mean that they're sharing Divrei Torah. that there's Torah amongst them, but there's something much more about this Shnayim Sheyeshvim, two that are sitting together and learning. The explanation here is as follows. How is this the real indication of what's going on with this person? What's the attitude of this person? In other words, seemingly you could say the learning Torah is just one aspect of who he is. The fact that he's learning Torah with someone, or he's teaching him Torah, there's Torah amongst them, how is that an indication regarding his entire attitude towards his fellow? So the explanation here is that Ikke Mitzias von allein mit Torah. What's the real entity of this person that learns Torah? That's what we're speaking about. We're speaking about someone that already learns Torah and he wants to be on the level of a chassid. Is das Gufe, it's this itself, sein Eisek in Torah, the fact that he's occupied on learning Torah. Und alle seine andere Sachen sind nicht mehr wie tochelige Sachen. The other things that are going on in his life are secondary. So if you want to really know what's going on with this person, who he is and what's his attitude to other people, the place to measure it and the place to prove it is not in his behavior in other areas of life, but it's dafke in Torah. Because Torah is his whole life. That's the main mitzias of who he is. Wie the Pasuk sagt, as the Pasuk says, a person should not accept praise about himself that he's so wise, or or with his might, with his strength, or with the wealth that he has. These three things, wisdom, might, or wealth, these are things that can change in gang von Zman over time. Rather, what should a person praise himself with? Haskel v'yadaya isi, the fact that he learns and understands Torah. Torah is a Sach was ständig. Torah is something which is constant, nitzchis, it's eternal. And this is our life, and this is for the length of our entire life, all the days of our life. Well, Derech Chazal, as the Mishnah says in the end of Kedushin, that ani is called that I put aside all other professions in the world, and I teach my son how to learn Torah because this is something that he has all his life. Ben Arusai, in his young age, Bizdiknusai, when he's in his old age, Chulu, the Torah remains with him. So we understand of all of this that if you want to really measure who a person is, when we speak about a person that is occupied on learning Torah, you look at his attitude to his fellow in his learning of Torah. Now, as Torah is the emesim hos from the Eisek b'Torah. So since the Torah that he learns is the real entity of who this Yid is, that's learning the Torah is movement, so it's understood as the bittul from Zaymu hos from Umetzias, to see to what degree he's nullifying himself, to what degree he's humble. This is measured by the sense of bittul, of humility that he has when he learns Torah. And therefore, the first part of the Mishnah that was discussing the right attitude you should have to your friend, not to deal with him in a condescending manner, not to swallow him alive, but to give him his space. And he's the same as you when you stand in front of Hashem. Here comes the next part of the Mishnah and says that this is expressed and measured by the attitude and the learning that when you learn with your friend. Das is the diuk, and now here, this is the deeper understanding of what the Mishnah means when it says, Shnayim sheyesh mechulu. There are two people here that are sitting and learning. It doesn't just say that a person is teaching Torah to someone else. It begins right away with the Shnayim. These are two that are learning. Calls man as their loimid is margish, as is einer. As long as the person learning feels that he is himself. He is the one that learns Torah. Is the chacham v'isuk and mechadish chedushim in Torah. He is the wise individual that is occupied and innovates big chedushim in Torah. Is ein lernen nit bei von Shnayim sheyeshvim. So then when he learns and he teaches someone else, he could be in the most kindest way, but nevertheless his attitude is, it's me. I'm the one that's learning and I know it, and I'm mechadish and I'm going to teach you. So then there's no real unity between them. Then there's no real humility in your attitude to your friend. Nit wie zwei, was lernen sitzendig begleich. It's not two that are sitting equally. So it's not just two that are sitting together, but they are on different levels. Two sitting means that they're two sitting on the same bench together. In a gleiche yeshiva, they're in the same yeshiva, so to speak. They're on the same level, in the same class, learning on the same level. Vibalt hält sich for a Rosh Yeshiva, because he may be sitting with someone else, but he considers himself to be a Rosh Yeshiva. I'm the head of the yeshiva and you're the student here. Und dem Zweiten, and his colleague or the other that's there, the Talmud. The other one is just sitting here as a student and I will teach him. He has to listen to me. And the Gemara describes that in those times in the Gemara, when the Tanoim, Amirayim would teach, there were rows. And if you were on a higher level, you were in the front row, and then there was further back rows. And you look at this person that's sitting across you, and you may look at him as someone that is just a recipient, and he belongs really at a back row. So this is a person that's learning in Torah, but nevertheless, he sees himself as I'm alone, the one that's learning Torah, not Shnayim, where we're not together sitting on the same bench. But if a person is totally, fully nullified, not only nullified to a degree, well, yeah, he's ready to teach him and so on, but really nullified to the point that he sees the other person as an equal. So then he could learn with his fellow in a meifim von Shnayim sheyeshven, that the other person feels that we are learning together and we're one and the same. Ke'echad. We're sitting on the same bench. We're really on the same level. We're learning Hashem's Torah here. Nit feeling the Gemailo von ein Loim mit Legabe dem Zweiten. And there's no feeling of that I'm better than you and I know more than you, but we're learning this together on the same level. And then, then, as the Mishnah says, the Shechina dwells amongst them. Was Shechina is their Gilui from Malchus Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This absolute bittul brings the dwelling of the Shechina amongst them. Ukiyidua, as it's known, based on what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya and Perek Vav, B'shas Hayid Poel Pasich Dem Bittul. When a Yid brings himself to this level of bittul, he doesn't see himself as anything. It's me and the other Yid, we're the same. The milas that I have, I'm smarter than, none of that matters. And as the Rebbe said before, Durech have a mispal b'shloime shel malchus kanal. And this is brought about by what the instruction of the first part of the Mishnah was, to recognize the kingdom of Hashem. As eres b'pchinas shnayim sheyeshven, and he has such a bittul that he sits with his friend on the same level. Demult is Shechina Shruya. That is what brings the Shechina to dwell. As Vetnesgala, the Bechina from Malchusa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this brings the revelation of the kingdom of Hashem, which is Malchusa Derikia, the heavenly kingdom. And here you have the revelation of heavenly kingdom itself. Nit nar durech his slapshus Malchusa Dara. Not only, like it explained in the first part of the Mishnah, when the person is working on this, and in order for him to connect to Hashem's kingdom and to have that feeling of the presence of Hashem, he comes to this through contemplating what kingdom in this world that he sees is. That's how he comes to connect to Hashem. But then, after that, when you come to that bittul, now the Shechina will come and dwell amongst you, and you'll have the ability to connect directly to Hashem himself. This brings the person to the perfect and the utmost level of the awe of Hashem, and to nullify himself to Hashem. But das is mitzat HaKadosh Baruch Hu, coming from the revelation from above, not from the hisbainus below that the person is working and coming to this, but then now there's a revelation that Shechina comes and dwells from above, and that brings the ultimate Yiras Hashem, where the person is completely bottled. So this is the connection of the two parts of the Mishnah. It's continuing mamish the same subject. That when you have a Yid that is working on this kind of a bittul in his relationship with his fellow, to give him the space and to not to overwhelm him, not to swallow him alive, and that demands a lot of humility. So then the Mishnah says that this humility is expressed in his learning of Torah. And when you have this ultimate humility, now comes a revelation from above. The Shechina will come and dwell upon you. Here the Rebbe will continue in Sif Zayin and explain now the pasuk that the Mishnah brings here regarding this, two people that are sitting and learning Torah together. And we'll see here in this pasuk that it's not just simply speaking about people that are learning Torah together, but the bittul to the godliness that there is in the Torah. And this is clearly seen in the pasuk that the Mishnah quotes. Al pi kolonal that noich verstehen dem loshen and the seder and pasuk was brengt sich in the Mishnah. We'll understand the language and the order of the pasuk that the Mishnah quotes for this subject of the two people learning together. Now these God-fearing Jews are sitting one with another. Hashem listens. For these God-fearing Yidden that are learning Torah together. So now, seemingly, the question here is, we're speaking about two people and they're learning Torah. That's the main point of this Mishnah, the Torah that they learn. Why is the Mishnah saying that these are two people that are God-fearing? Why not Talmidei Chachamim or Torah scholars? How is it relevant here to refer to these people as people that are God-fearing? So the point here is the fact that between them, together, there is words of Torah. This brings about that the Shechina dwells amongst them. is the far, weil the nidberu is an aneifim from Yirei Hashem. But this is only the case when their learning of Torah is not simply learning Torah, but it comes with the right attitude of Yiras Hashem in their learning. By Zay is durch the mispal, b'shloim shel malchus v'chayetze b'zeh. By these individuals, based on what we learned in the first part of the Mishnah, about recognizing the existence of Hashem in this world through looking at kingdom in this world, or in any similar way, the Yire from Melech Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Aneifen Goli Nikke v'Nirgesh. These are people, these are two Yidden, that their fear of Hashem is recognizable, it's there, it's felt, it's experienced, they're living with it. Azaya Zay Nidbru, in Torah, that their conversation in Torah is mitzadem v'zizen in them dark from Yirei Hashem b'shlarei. It's all a result of this, that they're connected to Hashem, that they're God-fearing. Der Heipech von Ish Yisrael Chaim Bloi. Here again we see clearly the connection of the two parts of the Mishnah when it brings here this pasuk of the Yirei Hashem, Ish Areyeyu, that these two people together are God-fearing, and therefore there's that oneness between them. This is the exact opposite of what it said in the first part of the Mishnah, when there's this separation, this huge gap between one and his fellow, when one is condescending in his attitude to his friend. The far kommen sie zu, so through this kind of attitude of the Yirei Hashem, what they reach is durch their limud Torah, through their learning Torah, to the madrege von Choshvei Shemai. What does Choshvei Shemai mean? Not only the fact that they're taking Hashem into account and they're giving Hashem his significance, but rather Kailaloich as by Zay the Herzach. Their learning Torah is that they sense what is the learning Torah all about. As Kol HaTorah is Shmeisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the entire Torah that they learn, as the Ramban says, it's all the names of Hashem, the holiness of the very words of Torah. When a person learns Torah, and it's about me, my level of learning, and I understand, and you don't understand, or you understand different than me, that's when you learn the Torah for the svaris, the ideas, the comprehension of the Torah. But if a person learns Torah with this achdus, that he's standing in front of Hashem, and he has absolute experience of Yirei Hashem, so then what's the main thing of his learning? The Torah is holy. It's the names of Hashem. Every word of Torah, the holiness of Hashem that's in the Torah, that's what the person senses. And that's the conclusion of the pasuk where it says, L'choshvei Shemai, that he learns the Torah with this attitude that it's all Shmeisav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the names of Hashem.